Welcome to Hashtag Got Money. I'm Elizabeth Jackson. So I interviewed our next guest. We just worked it out maybe 3 years ago. A very, very clever man, runs a training institute. And I haven't done this with you before, Dale, but I went to LinkedIn and I got this off your profile. Dale Gillham is a chief analyst and best-selling author and the founder of Wealth Within. Welcome to Hashtag Got Money, mate. How are you?
Oh, I'm fantastic. And you still look as young as what you were the first time I met you.
I'm not paying you enough money, obviously. So for our audience, do you want to just dive into a little bit about what you do and your background? Because I think that's a really important place to start.
Look, yeah, I mean, probably the main business is education. We're a registered training organisation. So it's a vocational training institute that we've been running for, I've been teaching and mentoring traders for well over 20 years, but we've been a registered organisation for about 15 years now. And we have a diploma in share trading investment, which is Australia's only government accredited course in the share market and trading. So we're flat out all the time. We're very, very busy because we don't run with those ones that as soon as you start Googling share trading and everybody wants to run a weekend workshop. We teach people properly. We are a fund manager as well, and we've been managing, I'm in charge of tens of millions of dollars, and we've been doing that for probably 15 years as well. So we work with, I'd like to say, average Australians, and I'd like to empower people with knowledge, and that's really what I like to do. Is teach people how to do it, but if you don't really want to do it yourself, I'll do it for you.
That's great. I think that's how I found you. I wanted to learn about how to do it. I don't think I ever did it, mind you, but I really wanted to learn.
No, I'm not sure whether you found my book, actually. Did you find my book first?
Maybe. Yeah, maybe I did, actually. I went on a wee mission because what people tend to do in the educational space is they tend to overcomplicate things. And when I found you initially, and I had that dialogue with you, you were anything but that. You took what I believe to be a really complicated space and just, you made it sound easy, which I really appreciated because, often people within the educational space and particularly things that I believe are complicated don't know how to articulate them to the average human being. So I think that's why it's nice to have you back on the show too, because I think a lot of us out there are wondering about the Australian stock market currently. I'd really like to get your thoughts on that.
Look, I think, I could go a couple of different ways with this. I mean, part of me saying the stock market's still a bit dangerous because it's rising I don't think it's rising on solid fundamentals and solid research. I think there's a lot of people out there. The advent of the internet and internet trading and, the iPhone, I was only saying to a journalist a couple of months ago, the iPhone has been out over 10 years now, and we have everything in the palm of our hand with the stock market, and it's just making all these people with not a lot of knowledge jump in. And on my YouTube videos, I do a live stream on YouTube every Tuesday night, and I help people and answer questions. And there's so many people trying to what we call bottom pick, and they're saying something's cheap, but it's not necessarily cheap. And thinking, oh, well, this stock's fallen from this price to this price, I'll buy it now. And they're making all the mistakes that I saw through the GFC, through the tech wreck, through 87, through, you name it, every one of them. People continually do the same thing. So whilst this week the market's looking more bullish to me, and actually this is the first week I thought, hey, we might be bullish, but what we talk about is the market we fell about 38% into the low into March, and our market's never gone into another bull market after falling 38%. Normally it goes up a little bit and then it turns and falls away again, and it falls a bit further. And I've been saying for quite some time that I thought about 80 to 90% of the total falls happened into the March low, but I'm not convinced the fall hasn't finished. So that's why I keep saying, I'm not really convinced yet.
I think I'm a bit like you. I look at stimulus coming in from government and it feels a bit artificial, doesn't it? You fill the shop with money, and of course everything's going to restabilize, but it just doesn't feel it doesn't feel accurate. So I guess, when will we start to see something? So you've noticed this week we've started to see some genuine recovery. Is that your thoughts?
Look, I've seen this week, because they move on Tuesday, we're holding up a little bit, but I'm not, the jury's still out. So whilst it's more encouraging, we need to wait. There's an old saying that the amateurs open the market and the professionals close it. So it happens on a daily basis, but it also happens on a weekly basis. So in my mind, what happens is when a market falls away, it starts to crash and people start to panic. Markets don't crash at tops, but we just crashed to the top. And I've never seen that in the history. And I've got data on our market back to 1875. And I've studied the Dow back to 1900s, well, actually further than 1900s, but I've got data on it. But all the books I've read on the history of the Dow, it's never crashed at the top. But we crashed at the top, and so did the Dow. And that's really strange. And so whilst I was predicting our market to peak and fall away at the time, I picked the peak was going to happen sometime within a few weeks, and I said it was going to fall away, but I thought the fall would be somewhere between 8 and 12%. It was 38%. We crashed. But what actually happens is because when the markets crash, they get cheap. Well, people say, hey, this is cheap. And so you get the amateurs, let's call them amateurs, say, wow, it's cheap. And they start buying in. And what happens is the market drifts up a bit because the professionals are staying out of it. And then eventually the amateurs run out of money because they don't have the trillions of dollars the big end of town has. And so they run out of money, and then the market folds over, and then it takes the next dive down because all the professionals are doing is taking some money from the amateurs and playing with them. And you see a lot of news that comes out. But right now, I'm still not convinced that the professionals are playing because we're not playing. I'm a professional trader. I'm not playing at this point in time because I would rather not make 10% than lose 10%. And what I mean by that is often people they have this fear of missing out, FOMO. So they see a stock that's cheap and they want to jump into it because they think, oh, I've lost it. And even on my YouTube channel this morning, I saw people, have I left it too late? Have I missed out already? And I'm like, no, you haven't, because I'm not even in it, the market at this point in time. Because sometimes if you don't see it drop below the prior low, the major low, like the low in March, you'll see it move up and come back down to around the same price roughly, which happened out of 87. We saw a move up 80 out of 87. And then it came right back within a few points in 1991. That's when we had our last recession that we're talking about, around 91. So that's possible we could be doing that. But I would rather not make 10% because if I don't make 10%, I just don't make 10%. But if I lose 10%, my remaining capital has got to make 11% to break even. So the more I lose, the harder it is to make money.
Yeah, it becomes counterintuitive, doesn't it?
Yeah, but people just are not getting it right at the moment.
Did you see a lot of people dump? Was there massive panic dumping?
Yeah, a lot of it. And I saw a lot of issues around the ETF market. And that caused, I think that's what caused it a little bit. We haven't had a test of ETFs at all because ETFs came out after the GFC.
What's an ETF?
ETF is called an exchange traded fund. So basically, everybody knew managed funds prior to the GFC because everybody had managed funds, whether it was their superannuation or whether it was an index fund. All an ETF is the same thing, except you just traded on the Australian Securities Exchange. That's all you're doing. Same thing. And so people are going into index ETFs because they didn't want to be in managed funds. So, but they've actually bought the same thing. And so you're getting these uneducated investors now.
Oh yeah, they're buying the home brand thinking it's not owned by the big guy. Yeah.
Correct. So they're buying this thinking that, well, hey, I've got control over that. But because they don't understand the market, then they tend to be more emotional. And that's what we've seen as I said, every crash. Every crash is driven by emotions, very, very much so. And we saw heightened emotions during that. But interestingly, the ASIC, I did a 3-part podcast on this, which is part 2 went out this week. And ASIC released a report 2 weeks ago today on the trading in March that happened between the peak in February and about a week past the low in March. And the statistics, and it was about retail investors, and the statistics are seriously scary about what people were doing. They had, I think it was 3.4 times the amount of new accounts got opened with retail brokers during that period. The trading was well over double. People were day trading. People were trading contracts for difference and FX. And one day alone, I think the contracts for difference losses were about $240 million with retail traders.
So it's like the inmates were running the asylum.
Yeah, correct.
Everybody got in
So
on it.
Yeah, well, people had a full-time job, and then the coronavirus happened. We go into lockdown. I go, well, I can't earn money at work, so I go home and I'll trade. And that's what I'm saying is that iPhone type of scenario is, well, I can buy BHP, I can buy Rio, I can do this, I can buy, Afterpay or all these different companies and try and make money. And these people at the moment are posting on my YouTube channel and saying, hey, I've made 20% on this stock. And I go, well, that's great, but 1 month doesn't make you a genius.
Exactly right. Exactly right. Now, Narelle Rubini back in 2018 predicted a massive financial global meltdown. And he indicated a lot of it was to do with the United States, Donald Trump playing poorly with his international partners, some pretty unregulated lending, which we'd already seen, particularly in the travel sector. Did you see this coming? Did you have an inkling that this was in the water?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. To me, I just didn't get the timing quite right. So that's what I was saying a little bit earlier is I knew the market was going to peak and come down, but I thought sort of 8 to 12, maybe 15%. But then I thought there would be another rise and then we'd come back into 2023 to 2025-ish, sort of. That's what I was looking at. Because the humans are very predictable. We are very habitual. We do things at the same time. So the market is also habitual, is that fund managers like me do the same things at the same times. And the big fund managers do it all the time. So it creates these cycles within the market. Now, we all know about the business cycle because we've heard about it at school. So, and there's economic cycles. The market just runs on those, and there's big cycles coming in. Now, my question right now is, has the low happened or is it still to come? That's my big question. And that's why I'm still sitting on my hands going, I'm not sure yet.
Yeah. I mean, 172 million to Qantas. So that's going to prop up travel. I was talking to one of my colleagues the other day and she said, do you know that Scott Morrison's bought a ton of oil out of the United States? And I said, why would we do that?
Why would we do that?
Why would we do it? Because we don't have the facilities to store that. So there's a lot of stuff happening that feels counterintuitive and a bit desperate.
Correct.
How do we as a nation start to trade back in? Because I'm guessing, look, I'm a buyer. I don't feel any proclivity towards going and buying out of the United States right now, or China, or any of those other countries. When we look at Australia as a buyer, where do we go now to create global partnerships that are going to give us any confidence? Because every time America does something, we down here in Australia, honestly, we get the worst head cold.
Yeah, and I really hear what you're saying, and I think there's. I do a weekly interview with a gentleman in Georgia in the US, an entrepreneur, a gentleman called Jim Beach, and he's a best-selling McGraw-Hill author. And I've talked about this a few times with him, and I said when the coronavirus was starting, I said it was only 2 weeks ago we were talking about the US-China trade war, and they've signed a deal, and now we've got another kind of war. It's just a big war.
A big war.
And it's a huge war, and it's a bio war, with this. And I said, I don't call me a conspiracy theorist, but there's something here that's not just a virus, because I didn't expect the market to fall that hard, and there was no reason for it to fall that hard based on what I was seeing. But hey, we can all be wrong. But to me, what you're seeing in the US, and I deal with people like I was actually talking with Jim this morning for an hour. I'm on Zoom. And I talk with a gentleman in New York who's high up in the NASDAQ, and another gentleman in New York who's very well connected in Wall Street. And they're all telling me there's a huge shift that's going on in the US, and there's a lot of people sick and tired of exactly what you just said. They are really sick and tired of being fed the Donald Trump stuff, and they're also sick and tired of being led to the slaughter, so to speak. And with
massively so.
So there's huge shifts happening right at the moment, and they need to be. And I think, you know, Australia needs to be independent a lot more. We can't just follow on the coattails of the US. And I think our politicians need to really have a big think about, we need to be self-sufficient. The world needs our commodities. They need what we do. China still needs our commodities. So, you know, and I think we need to stand up on the world stage. And I think Scott Morrison did a great job in terms of saying, well, hang on, we need an inquiry, but it's great the other world leaders are supporting that, you know, into what's going on.
Scott needed that support too. You
Mm.
cannot you cannot wave a red flag at China and hope they're not going to smack you. And we needed our partners to stand up alongside us. I was having a really interesting conversation with a woman called Christina Hobbs, who's the CEO of Verve, and she said to me, when they, as a super fund, spend money, they buy local. They buy energy in Australia. They buy green energy in Australia. They put their money into housing. They look more at home. Are we going to see our investor market start to do that more and more consciously as a result of this?
Oh, look, I believe so. I think there's a lot of things that we can be doing as individuals and also as businesses to really support Australia, because we have to do that, because coronavirus has basically been a big slap across the cheek saying it's now time to wake up. You know, this is not going to be the last pandemic we're going to see, and it hasn't been the first one, but it's been the first one that's really affected every single person. You know, with SARS, it really didn't affect us, and some of the other ones that we've had. If you go back to look at the World Health Organization, look at all the pandemics that have happened in the last 20 years, there's a lot of them, you know. But this is the first one that's hit every single person on the planet, and it's affected lots of Australians. We're still sitting at home talking. You know, I'm not in your studio. Last time we met.
Yeah,
You know,
we're hanging out.
I had my
Which I
suit and
love.
tie on last time.
Yeah.
So,
I love it like this.
Yeah, so do I. It's much more casual, but it's still, we've all been affected. Now we're flat out, and there are a lot of businesses that are flat out, but there's a lot of businesses that I seriously feel for that are going out the back door. So I think Australians need to rally together and support everybody, and support the business people and support the community. And us as a business, you know, we're supporting people. We've employed a Qantas pilot, you know, as one of our assessors.
Fantastic.
So he emailed through and said, oh, I've lost my job. And I said, well, we'll give you one. And we've given him a job. I'm looking for 4 more people at the moment, because we're very, very busy. Now I know he's going to go and fly planes again, and we're only paying him probably half of what he would get paid at Qantas being an international pilot, but he's got a job, you know, and he's very appreciative. And to me, support us rather than go offshore, rather than buy things from offshore, support Australia.
Support local. I love that. I absolutely love that. So we will, perhaps as a nation, start to shop locally and support locally, which it kind of feels like that's pretty evident anyway when we're not really allowed to travel anywhere. So this is a big question, and I've been dying to ask her. I kind of feel like the pandemic, which I know is real, and I don't want to take away from that, has been a cover over the financial crisis. The financial crisis was going to come anyway. Absolutely. It just coincided with the pandemic. And I think that's been lost in the translation. I think the government were going to have to bail out the travel industry anyway, whether we had the pandemic or not. That we were going to have to release billions of dollars out of the economy to support people that were about to lose their jobs because of this financial crisis. And I don't think anyone's actually articulated that. I think it's been pandemic and by the way. Do you feel like the message on that's been lost? Or am I the only
absolutely.
one?
No. You're not definitely not the only one. There are people in the US thinking the same thing, definitely thinking the same thing, because when you look at the markets, if you go right back probably 30 years ago, I think it was about 30 years ago, there's an act in the US called the Glass-Steagall Act. And that got repealed, but that allowed the financial system to go rampant. So if you look at all the statistics in the US, what caused the GFC was initially the trigger was repealing the Glass-Steagall Act, and that's the GFC was happening. And you can't continue to, when they also go back further than that, when they uncoupled currency to gold, that was the very, very first step. And as soon as you did that, it allows the US to keep printing money. Now, you can't keep printing money with nothing backing it. So there's some of the big issues that have caused where we are today. Today, if everything that goes up comes down, and all dynasties, if I can say that. There's a gentleman called Noam Chomsky. I don't know if you've ever read stuff of him. He talks about dynasties, or those, like the Holy Roman Empire, the English Empire.
Yes, yes.
The American Empire is now coming to its end, and I've been talking about that for quite some time. But right now, we're getting a changing of power in the world. China's been very, very open in saying it wants to be the dominant power in the world. So now the world's playing chess at this point in time. So
I feel like we're
who
a bit
knows
of
what will
a
happen?
we're a piece on that chessboard in actual fact.
Yeah,
And
yeah, but I think with keep
so
going.
how do we come out of that? How do we, because we're not big enough to protect ourselves, and we're
Correct.
really exposed. We're in this. I mean, you look at what happened after World War II. We basically went to the United States and said, you know what, if we could be mates and if we could sign this would be great, because we're going to need you, because Britain's screwed and they can't come to us. So we already know that we're super vulnerable, and we are literally in Asia, so how do we delicately love everybody, but just not, I don't want us to accept what's happened to us from China. I don't want us to accept that as a country. So how do we do that? It feels like a
Yeah,
really
that's
delicate
where.
dance.
Yeah, it is a very, very delicate dance, and there's two different levels to this. Is one is what do I individually do, and the
Yes.
second thing is what do we do as a community and a country. So that's the other level that we've got to do. And you're quite correct, but Australia is resource rich, so we do have lots of friends around the world, such as the US, UK, obviously New Zealand, very, very much so, and other Asian countries. So it's going to be a really delicate dance over the coming decades. And really, I don't think there's a simple answer to anything, and it just depends on what we do. But we need politicians that aren't about themselves, and this is what we need: politicians to look at from everybody else's
Yeah.
perspective. It's not about you having a job; it's about what's best for the country. Do we allow foreigners to buy land in Australia, have businesses, buy farms, those sorts of
Exactly
things,
right.
regardless of where they
Exactly
come
right.
from?
Exactly
It's not
right.
about the money.
What a
And when you
beautiful
put
way.
money into it, well, to me, money adds energy to everything. And when what we've seen is, I don't know if you've ever studied, uh, I forgot what the name of the spiral dynamics. It's about values-based systems, basically, and we go up different levels. We go from being selfish to being community, then to selfish, then being community. We've been a very selfish society for quite some decades at the moment. So that's what I'm saying, there's a collective shift around the world saying, well, hang on, this is not fair anymore. So you're getting riots in the US right now, very, very much so. People protesting in the US about having their civil liberties taken away from them, all sorts of stuff. And that's the grassroots that I see. And Australians, we're very much, yes, you'll be right. We don't need to worry about it. Okay. But we can't look at that anymore. We do have to buy Australian. We do have to protect Australia's. And yes, we have a multicultural society, and I don't suggest we shouldn't continue to embrace that, but we need to obviously, well, what is the Australian values? What are we? What do we value in Australia? And as a collectively work towards that. As an individual, in terms of, obviously looking after your own self, your money, I just say to people, they go, wow, all this is going on in the world. What do I do? And I go, well, what can you control? As an individual, do what you can control. Don't worry about everything else in terms of trying to understand the US and China and the big economics of it. But what can you control? I can control that I can do a budget and I can free up some money. I can control that I'm going to go out and buy some property, because from what I'm seeing, and you're a bit more of an expert on property than I am, but I think there's a massive, massive property boom going to come in the not too distant future.
We are weeks. We are
Time.
literally weeks away. Anyone that's sitting out there thinking that we're not, I literally have 10 clients that I'm working with right now. We are weeks away. We are waiting on an announcement for an increase in a package. And once that comes through, it will, and I've got my clients are lining up, because you don't get a better environment to buy in, because all of a sudden there's a softening in land prices, there's a softening from the builders. So yes, I agree with you. I think that property market is going to surge, and I've got to say this. I love the Australian government for really digging into that. You know, we are the building industry is the single largest industry in Australia, and it used to be mining, and it's not. I think, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong. I think it's the construction industry. So God love Scott Morrison for the way he's managing that, because for at last families can get into homes, and I love that. I love it.
Yep. Look, I don't have an issue. I think he's done a very, very good job, and you know, I don't want to make this a political type thing. I think he's done a great job with this. You know, and I do support it, but we need to support Australians and Australian businesses.
Yes.
You know? So
Yes.
you know, like everything, the Army and the Navy and Air Force and everything should be buying everything from Australia. The submarines should be made in Australia, that sort of stuff. And I don't care as an Australian, I don't care if it costs us a little bit more. I'd just rather an Australian build it because it's going to support Australia.
And I agree with that. And you know what? That was Donald Trump's mantra. That's why he's gone ahead and he has literally upset all of his trading partners. And I agree with you. I think as a consequence of this, we need to look inward and we need to take care of each other. And if there are global partners that want to work nicely with us, then certainly we do that. I have to agree with that. And I think we also need to check where our things come from now. We need to consciously look at them. You have been amazing. Thank you so much for joining me. Incredible. I always love hanging out with you, man. Your depth of knowledge just surpasses mine like a rocket. Let's do this again.
I don't think so. I think you're pretty good.
Let's give this another month. Let's give this another month to 6 weeks and just tune back in and see where we're at, because the fact that you've got that information coming in from the US, I find really interesting. Dale, how do our listeners find you?
They can go to wealthwithin.com.au. If they want to watch my videos, just go to YouTube and just type in Wealth Within TV, and there's all about the market, what I think, etc., etc. there.
I'm going to go there. I'm going to start hanging out with you.
No problems.
Take care, mate.
We'll hang out and have a coffee.
Oh, when we get through this, won't that be? Hey, that's the best part about this. It's just hanging out with people again, you know, without the screen. Take care, mate. All the best. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you very much.
Bye.